Good evening. Welcome to CATV. This evening, the sponsor is League of Women Voters. The topic is feeding the people, local and global. The timeliness is that the major farm legislation, properly known or commonly known as the Farm Bill, is now over the next 2 weeks entering conference and will help set the stage for U.S. and global agriculture for the next 5-year period. With us this evening are Adam Saunders and Bill Heffernan. I'm Gregg Suhler. Let me briefly introduce Adam Saunders. He is the Public Relations Coordinator. Conducts outreach and promotional talks with local groups, businesses and potential farmers for urban agriculture. The CCUA's online research presence, strategic planning, and fundraising efforts are part of Adam's portfolio. Adam has been involved in the community agriculture and environmental organizing since the mid-2000s. As a student with Sustain Mizzou, Adam has been gardening since a young kid, and being the son of 2 teachers, has considered himself an informal teacher his whole life. With the CCUA, Adam is able to combine these passions to connect dots within the local food system. An exciting place to be working. So welcome, Adam.
Glad to be here.
Bill Heffernan is a Professor Emeritus of Rural Sociology at the University of Missouri. He grew up on an Iowa farm and still lives on a farm northwest of town. He came to Missouri in 1969, focusing on examining the social consequences in the changing structure of agriculture. He is perhaps best known for his research documenting the decline in the number of firms providing inputs and markets needed by farmers, and the growing economic power held by the 4 largest firms in each sector. Over time, this research required him to expand his focus to include the entire food system nationally and internationally. I, as a panelist, and in lieu of Jim Robertson, who couldn't make it tonight, worked at the University of Missouri in think tanks for over a decade, mainly with food and agriculture at FAPRI, but also some rural policy with RUPRI. With education in physics and a background in production and Main Street agribusiness, I was a founder and leader of the nationwide American Agriculture Movement, AAM, of the late 1970s, the tractor parade folks. I worked in the Carter administration on domestic policy staff in the White House as a White House fellow, and now do private sector climate prediction. I'm a native of Colorado. So as we look at our topic, feeding the people, local and global, takes so little time to say, but soon invites question after question, topic after topic. Who is feeding whom, what, and how much, and how successfully? Would you like to address that first, Adam?
Right. Thank you. Glad to be here. I think part of that where you can start and where with the Center for Urban Agriculture, where we start is kind of at the individual level in home food production. Around the world, and as well here in America, there's been a long history of food production at home, vegetable gardens, raising animals, diversified farms. And that's where we focus our work, is to work with families one-on-one, work with kids about where food comes from, and help people get established gardens or orchards at their house, chicken coops, and in an urban setting where people have moved to over the last many years, that it's possible even in small places to grow food. And you can think of that, that's a big part of everybody's personal food system. And you kind of think of that in a kind of a nested way, where at that kind of 0 level is your home food production, personal food production. One level out, at level 1, is the direct to farmer, direct purchasing from farmers. So think of the farmer's market or a CSA subscription. Kind of the next level out is the regional distribution, where you're buying from a local grocery store, like Root Cellar here in town, for example, buys food and resells it locally. And further out is kind of the national food system, grocery stores, bigger distribution, and then global, getting food from around the world. And we all participate in all those different levels. I drink coffee, and it comes from the global food system. But I think where a lot of growth for that question can occur everywhere in the world is growing food at home in small places, and that can be a really big part of where people source their food from. Certainly has been in this country over the years, especially during difficult times, like during depressions or wars. And I think even in the last few years, there's been a big resurgence in the interest of home gardening, canning, and knowing more about where the food comes from.
Adam, you've identified a few things that we may get back to as part of the recent trend. Bill, do you have any comments on the broader
Let me take
question?
it just sort of the opposite part of this, and that is at the global level. One of the things that concerns me probably the most today is the fact that we have half of the world's population that earns about $1 a day, or $2 a day. And these people are really in need of food, but the problem is that the large agricultural system that produces the food in this country, this system has been transported to other countries of the world, and most recently Africa is really where we're seeing this happen. And they are going into production, and they are producing food in those countries, much of which it gets moved out of the local country where it is being produced. And so, in fact, the people who are really hungry in the world today are not receiving much food, and the way the system is evolving, rather than rapidly in your direction, many of the world people are living in situations where they are losing the access to land, and thus they won't be able to do what you're doing.
Right.
And that's one of the real problems I think we need to address. We talk about how much food and Greg, you know more of the numbers on this than I do, but we talk about how much we export supposedly food to other countries. In fact, our biggest products we sell are really grains and such, like soybeans and corn. And in fact, most of that goes to other countries, not for human food, but for animal food, because in much of the world, we have the developing countries, and the middle class wants more of this type of food, and it's not really going to the hungry people.
You've underscored one of the emergences of a market-oriented agriculture following especially the World War II period, and then the development of food for peace programs, which were intended to address some of those issues. But one of the things that, as one looks at this over time, as I have, I know that a lot of things change, but a lot of things don't change, and we continue to be dependent, for example, on a global basis, on just 4 major crops for over 50% of our nutritional basis. Those are wheat and rice at about 19% each, and those are both food grains, mainly produced and consumed right in the same country, same location. Highly populous countries tend to be the high producing countries as well. Then corn or maize, more directly, accounts for about 5%. Then the soybean complex and legumes accounts for just on the order of 8 or 9%. These according to 2007 FAO surveys, the most recent available in that. And those distributions don't tend to change that much over time. The really big change that has occurred in agricultural demand side since about 2002 is really due to one thing, or pardon me, two things. One is the biofuels policy led by the U.S. And this came about in the late 2007-2008 period with a run-up in first food prices and then in energy prices. And the U.S. policy, one of the U.S. policies to directly address energy, increasing energy prices, was to mandate mainly ethanol, but secondarily biodiesel. And so that's been one big factor. The second has been the growth since 2002 of China per capita income. It's been largely income driven in a pattern that, Bill, I know you've monitored around the world for some time. So other than that, much of the rest of the world on a per capita basis is roughly flat in its consumption patterns. And so the only other country that immediately comes to mind as far as having a large population, but because of some internal differences, contrast between China and India, is India possibly entering that. You could have conceivably over the next several decades major population centers led by Oceania, Indonesia, perhaps to do something that has had as big as impact as what China has had. But for the most part, that's not really showing up yet, again, on a per capita basis. So there's much for us to try to think about as we see what comes forth in U.S. agricultural policies and programs, how that affects market, how it affects and informs the companies that Bill has studied so effectively over the last 20 or so years.
Or so.
Or so. Or so. One of the questions, Adam, that you started to allude to, I think, was why people are growing now. Is there any perceived difference in food safety or food quality that comes with the urban agriculture side?
Absolutely, both of those, and I think it's also a cultural thing about knowing where your food comes from, being involved with food. The other part of the big food system is food for direct consumption. So fruits and vegetables that you can grow potatoes and eat them locally, or tomatoes, or any number of things. The reasons to do that are very many, and it's just about access. And if you grow it yourself, that's a good price point. And, growing a garden is, on a good year, is a life of abundance, where you have a lot of food, you can store it, you can share it, and I think that those kind of things that in the community that is created by the lifestyle of growing a diversity of crops, especially with neighbors and with friends, it is a big social thing. It just drives the culture of food. I know the slow food movement it has taken off globally, and it's an effort to slow down, and it was a reaction to fast food. And so the idea is to slow down, to talk about what's in our food, where we get our food from, to preserve the character of the food and recognize the people who grew it and brought it to us. I think that's a really good thing that's happening here, and I mean, counterbalancing a lot of global things that are very big, and it's an interesting kind of dichotomy of what's going on, the two kind of spectrums of the food system. But I think that in the realm of that food for direct consumption, the gardens, the fruits, the orchards, I think there's definitely been a big interest in it and driven by a wide number of things. And I think globally, I think that's should be our goal of international policy, is to help other regions establish some food, local food sources of direct consumption, and not disrupt what they have. I think that's one of where things can really create problems.
And that's partly what's happening, is that the land, large companies, and some of these corporations, as they go under the name of corporation, but in fact, they're really an extension of the country. China, India, Indonesia, Thailand, all of these have large corporations that go to other continents, quite frankly, and buy huge tracts of land. One of them out of China actually went out and over to Brazil and bought the largest freshwater lake they had in the country, and then thousands of hectares around that. One of the interesting questions is, where's that food going to go? Mm-hmm. What country policies are they going to have if they should decide to set up an embargo? Can they embargo China's products they produce in Brazil? There's a whole host of issues like this that are going wrong.
Right.
But it's not unusual. And the other interesting thing that's also happening is that two of our big four hog processing plants in this country, one of them being owned by a Brazilian firm, and the other one just recently got bought by a Chinese firm. So when our farmers up in northwest Missouri raising hogs up there at the premium standard location get up in the morning, they have to think, well, their boss really lives over in China now. What does it mean to our own U.S. system? Are we going to be able to maintain control of it? Things are happening so fast right now in agriculture with the technology and so on. Just within the last month, Dow, Monsanto, Syngenta, and John Deere have kind of teamed up in a data collection operation. We're going to gather more information and put it together. One of the interesting things is on the new combines, these combines that are costing over $600,000 a piece now, when like in John Deere's case, whenever they have a major problem, they pull it into the local dealer, they hook it up to the electronically to the computer back somewhere else, and somebody back there diagnoses it. That means all the information on that machine is going back to there. And if you talk with some of the service people and so on in John Deere dealership, they will tell you that they're probably also collecting all that information from the GPS system on how much is being produced per acre on that farm where that combine is before long. They're going to know well before harvest season what basically the national yield's going to be. I mean, it's this kind of change going on very rapidly.
Right.
And how does that impact the whole food system? And capital in these handful of large multinational corporations really are trying to take control of the global food system, and they've done a pretty good job of it. They basically decide there are two cartels that handle the fertilizer, and there's not a U.S. firm that's a part of any of those cartels, and they basically, as from one CEO of Yarrow, a Norwegian firm, said when asked one time, you don't have enough, you're not producing enough fertilizer to go around the world. How are you going to decide who gets it? And the CEO said, well, we'll have to allocate it. I don't know what U.S. allocation will be.
Well, the usual practice is allocation with markets and with prices.
It used to be.
It used to be. And the recent collapse of the potash cartel helps underscore the importance of the question mark that comes with, in our total food production globally, as mentioned since World War II, fully more than 50% of the growth has come from fertilizer, is attributable to fertilizer usage. The nitrogen component of that is still fairly assured. Ultimately drawing nitrogen sources either from natural gas, a primary process, the Haber process, which has been around for over 100 years. But then and maybe somewhere in laboratories at some point, the nirvana point of being able to get nitrogen fixation directly in a more mechanical process from the air, perhaps awaits us. But between the fertilizer and genetics, as far as how those have changed, what are you seeing both at local level and global? Could we talk about the fertilizer and the genetics that that gets a lot of attention?
I think there's two different stories, whether you're looking at the local people composting their ag waste and using animals to create manure, and genetics being let's use heirloom seeds and preserve and have the biggest gene pool you can to have diversity. I think so that the strategies in that front and building your soil and investing in your soil and doing what you can to slow the water down on your land so that fertility stays available as long as possible, I think is something that's principles of small space growing that people use in urban settings and in small areas that ring our cities that provide food in a local food shed, you could call it. Those are some guiding principles that a lot of people are using to base their farm off of. And I know on a bigger scale, it's quite different.
Let me change the topic just a little bit. I want to bring back I've been a little negative on my comments. Let me flip this in just a moment and talk about what I think is probably the most exciting thing that's happening in U.S. food system right now, and that is that the consumer has finally gotten involved. You know, Greg, we watch these farm organizations, watch these issues go through the whole debate for the years, and nothing happened. Farmers were trying to change it. They never got very far. They got various farm programs, but never got very far. But finally, the consumer has really gotten involved, and that is what is making a lot of difference. And as I look at it, I remember Mary Hendricks and I, and Jerry Wade, some others were involved with helping to get the Kansas City Food Circle set up. That was sort of one of the first efforts over in Kansas City. They led the nation as one of the outstanding groups. And so we went over to help them get started. One of the things we said, as they were asking Mary and myself, you know, what really can they do that's different? And as we thought about all the advantages the large firms have, what they cannot do is build trust with the consumer. All they can use is advertising. And so back to your local market.
Right.
What you really are doing is you're using trust. The people come, meet you face to face, develop that personal relationship, and of course we can do that electronically now too. It doesn't always have to be physically, but that always helps to develop the trust. And as they have done that, and as people you're talking about share how they're doing their productions, suddenly the consumers have really begun to get involved in the whole food system. And they're saying, we want this, this, and this. And when you think all the issues, the non-GMO, the organic, I mean, you just go down through that whole long list. They just keep piling on, if you will. The consumer's involved, and things are beginning to change rather significantly.
Right, I think that's spot on. I think that drives a lot of it is, you know, that's
right.
to the market solutions. If there's more demand for kale and tomatoes throughout the season, then local farms will meet that demand. I think the challenge for us to grow that is to find ways to market and find new customers locally. Because, you know, here in Columbia, there's about 100,000 people, easily in the surrounding area, 300,000 not too far out. Everybody's going to eat every day. So that's a lot of hungry people who are going to be eating, and that's finding ways to involve people locally in our area, and this goes around the whole world. How can they connect with the farmers around them to access the land and then organize markets in a way that farmers can get paid a good price so that they stay in business and they pass their farms on from generation to generation, and also it is distributed throughout the community in an equitable way. Not just the people who can afford to pay the highest dollar for food. Those are some big challenges that I think to grow from where we are, we've seen great growth in the local food system.
Absolutely.
And how do we take it to the next level beyond just the several thousand people that come to the farmers market every week and the restaurants that purchase local food, but to get it more broadly, to people? That's a real question.
It's coming. It's growing.
It is.
If you had told me back in 1995 how far we'd be down the line on local markets, I'd have thought you were drinking something.
Right. I think one model I've seen that's really exciting we're starting to do some work in. I saw this when I was traveling in the New England area, and they had these very large CSA vegetable farms. They had 500 shares. I'm like, how are you guys moving so many shares of produce? Well, what they had done is they had collaborated with some of the big employers in the area, the hospital, the IBM facility, the university, and they had health and wellness programs. And so they worked through these big employers to develop a CSA distribution in the lobby of their office building. The company would subsidize it a little bit. They would do some of the payroll to make sure that the farmer got paid. And then that's the way that they've moved a lot of produce. And that's how a great way that we can do locally to find new customers. So I think that's just one of the potential solutions that we're working on here in Columbia and that we'd like to see. And I think it'll make a big splash here.
As we come to the end, what has been underscored is the importance of people understanding and being involved in their, in not just the food side, but sending messages back up through the market system and down through the market system as to what is desirable. I'd like for each of you to identify, just as we close, and I'll lead by saying, a very good online source of keeping up with what's happening in agriculture in all its breadth is www.foodandagpolicy.org. It's sponsored by a list of about 12 of the major foundations in the U.S. and some international. But I highly recommend following that on the news feed, perhaps on a daily or weekly basis. And if you've got any sources that you'd like to mention, Adam?
Yeah, if you want to learn more about what the Columbia Center for Urban Agriculture is doing with our urban farm and with our opportunity gardens and on-farm education, edible landscaping, our website is columbiaurbanag.org.
Bill, do you have anything you'd like to point to, or
Well,
even a Googling?
Mary Hendrickson is the one that really is doing these days. I think her website is, let's see, it's Food Circle Networking Project at Missouri.edu. And a lot of the research we've done over the years and what she continues to do is there.
Very good. Are there any last comments you'd like to make? And if we are cut off even as we're speaking them, well, maybe that's as it should end. So.
Well, I think one thing that is great that people can get involved at their home level. Even small spaces can be productive. Even if you've got room for just a little herb garden for some basil and thyme, that's being part of the food system.
You can do that with the pot.
That's right. Just a small spot will make a lot of food.
Good. Bill?
I have more.
That's it. Well, I thank you for joining us this evening. I thank our panelists, and I wish the League continued good work, and glad to be able to participate. Thank you.
Okay.